Good evening and welcome to the Fourth Estate. My name is Raymond Mujini. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, this week the Uganda Police Force released the police crime report, which is the most authoritative set of data on crime and crime trends in the country. And today on the Fourth Estate, we want to talk about just how that report was covered, but also what the police perception on the coverage of crime is in the country. And of course, to join me, I have an elite panel here who are some of the finest brains we can find on crime. I'll start with you, Charles Twine, who speaks for the Crime Investigations Department of the Uganda Police Force. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Raymond, and thank you, the management of this institution, for hosting us. I bring sincere greetings from the Uganda Police, and most particularly from the Director of Criminal Investigations, GP Grace Akoro.
Thank you so much. And we have Tom Malaba, who is the most accomplished crime reporter in the country, with, I think, the longest experience on reporting on crime. Have I described that correctly?
Thank you, thank you. Good evening, viewers.
Yeah, so I wanted to start with you, Tom, because you've reported on crime for a long time, and you've interacted with the police crime report a lot of times. What's your perception of the way journalists are interacting with the crime report now?
The way journalists are interacting with the crime report, to me at the moment, leaves a lot to be desired, because in most cases it is reported as an event. It is not reported as a continuing situation that is showing the crime trend in the country. What crime was in 2015, all the crimes that affected this country in 2015 are still the same crimes that are affecting this country 5 years later. The only problem is that there are growth in some areas and there are reductions in some areas. So every day, you see, after the crimes report has been released, we ought to be using this as a yardstick. Yes, there is a murder in a particular place, say in Kalelwe. Can you refer to the crime report and tell us what crime was like in that particular area, how it was in Kalelwe the previous 5 years or 10 years? But in most cases, when you see, we report the event, and the moment we are done with the event, we throw away the crime report. Yet that crime report shows us the trend. We should be informing the people on a daily basis. Please be aware of this. This crime is on the increase. It has been on the increase for the last 10 years, and in most cases it is going to be. But what we do is that once the report is released, we just report the statistics as they are, without telling the public to be aware of a particular crime, to watch out in particular areas, so that we create a sensitization kind of situation that the public is well aware what is going to be coming next.
Charles, if I could bring you in here, you just released the report this week and you carried the headlines for, I think, Tuesday and Wednesday. Are you happy with the way journalists are reporting about the crime data that you've produced? Where do you think that journalists could report better?
With your permission, I can move this.
Yes, you can. You can all move the masks.
My most immediate neighbor is covered. Thank you, Raymond. I personally don't want to rate the performance of our friends in the profession of journalism. But to be sincere, they have analyzed this crime report very well. In any case, even we, the authors, we had tried to label it and put it in a language that every person can understand. The data which is there can be read. Some of the incidents that we reported in this annual crime report are fresh. They have been covered by the journalists, and some information is not a surprise to them. So it enhanced them really to read, comprehend, and share the information very well. So personally, and I think on behalf of the institution, we don't have any problem whatsoever with how you're analyzing and reporting.
There was a report done by the Daily Monitor, I think on Wednesday, questioning the number of cases that have not been investigated. And I think there's also a cartoon today drawn by Chris Ogon, where he says, he basically shows a police officer sitting back and just drawing lots on whether crime should be investigated. Do you feel like journalists have exerted enough pressure on the CID department, for example, to investigate crime?
Why should we give us pressure? We don't need pressure, and there is no kind of pressure we are going to subdue, to succumb to. Because for us, basically, we do our mandate. Very clear, stated in the Constitution, as well as other legislations, but most immediate, the most immediate being the Police Act. So we don't subscribe to any kind of pressure, although we are aware that there are some people who are cynical. There are some people who are cynical. They often castigate us to be lazy, to be incompetent. But at the end of it all, after saying that, the next day he needs your service. Now, looking at what our friends from Daily Monitor had done, I looked at that cartoon, although it's not that kind of, ritual. Sometimes I think some information is put in place for fun. But, there is, Ugandans need to understand how we do investigations. We receive big volumes of information, but not everything that is brought to police it really suffices. Somebody brings a matter which is completely civil. And sometimes even the reporter knows that this matter is civil. Somebody has entered an agreement for a sale of a property. There is a breach of an agreement. Somebody wants to use police. And of course, we have some police officers who either inadvertently or deliberately register some of those civil matters. Now, the moment it reaches to me as the supervisor, I will say, now look, this is a civil matter. We cannot proceed. But it's already in the record. And it becomes very hard to move it from the record. You get the point. Secondly, there are some cases reported, but the reporter does not want to volunteer information. Some of the cases we investigate, evidence is got on the reporter. Take, for example, the case of defilement. Somebody brings a girl as the victim. He reports, this is my girl. She has been defiled by so-and-so. Defilement is proved by majorly 3 elements. 1 is age. 2 is penetration. And 3 is ensuring that the person you are talking about is actually the real person who defiled you. Now, police whatsoever does not know the age of the victim. But you, the mother, you, the father, know the age. So what's wrong with you providing us with a proof of the age, that this girl is below the age of 18? If you don't, fine, that case will have been registered with us, but we may not give you the better results because we cannot really assume the years. 2, quite often, actually I was sharing with Tom Malaba some time back, that sometimes we are castigated for crimes or for incompetencies of other stakeholders. In one of the examples I want to give, still on defilement, once a victim has been brought to the police station, he is given what we call Police Form 3. This is the form that a medical officer uses to examine and ascertain whether there was penetration, no matter whether it was slight. Now, some people are given those Police Form 3, take it, they don't come back. When they go, either the perpetrator knows that a case has been reported. Sometimes they even use it as tools of intimidation. Say, I've reported you. Now, a negotiation ensues. At the end of it all, a matter is settled. The person doesn't want to bring back the form. And we cannot proceed and prosecute the perpetrator when we don't know whether there was penetration or not. But the matter will already be in the record. So at the end of it all, we shall indicate that the volume at the time of reporting was big, but the output was very small. So I want the journalists to analyze that kind of situation sometimes before you make a conclusion. Somebody reports a case of theft. They have stolen my vehicle, but you don't have any proof of ownership of that vehicle. You don't have any proof. Even when we recover it, in whatever circumstance, you don't have any proof that this vehicle belongs to you. What do you expect police to do? So, true, the number reported sometimes, you know, looks to be big, but the output looks to be slightly smaller because of some of those circumstances. The examples are so many, I can mention many until the cows come back.
I want to bring in Tom here. Tom, you've been listening to Charles there, and I know that you've walked through the corridors of police. Is it just the facts he's talking about, or corely also that the crime report is really a tool where we can tell whether the police is doing their job or not?
Part of what he's saying, yes, it is true, but I want to take him away from the volumes and take him to the very figures that they produce. Today I was looking at the crime report, and I saw that there were 37 cases of robbery of motor vehicles, and police managed to recover, I think there were 21. And 16 vehicles are still missing. When you look at the other years, it is not changing much. Why is it that these vehicles are missing? What happened last year where I'm sure even the other year, more vehicles were robbed and they were never seen. But the question is, are we looking at the value lost? Because in all these circumstances, when a vehicle is stolen, that is money handed to criminal syndicates. And it is the work of the police to collect whatever has been stolen. I was looking at the statistics from Nakalema's office, the anti-corruption unit of State House, and I saw that during the year, government lost 5.8 billion worth of in corruption cases, and they only managed to recover 120 million. That means a total of 5-something billion has been lost to criminals. Every money that is lost to criminals is goes back into the system to fund more crime. More crimes. And that is where we should be looking at. Yes, they are investigating. There is a lot that is happening between the reporting and between the reporting and the taking to court. But yes, how many cases have we taken to court? If we have so many thousands of cases that have been reported to police, okay, some of them have been withdrawn for one reason or another, but then at the end of the day, can we be in position to quantify what was taken to court vis-a-vis the police budget? If we are talking of a police budget of about 840 billion in a year, how much are we getting out of that? We should be, the public should be in position to see that yes, there were 20 cases of defilement, but 18 were taken to court. 2 people withdrew for lack of interest. But if we sit back, because this is what I know, this is what happens in the police. The police have become desk officers. They investigate at the desk. The victim is the person to investigate the criminal. He will report his phone number, he will report his home, he will report everything that surrounds that. But you rarely see that the police have left their desks to go out in the field. So everything is fed to them, which increases the chances of negotiations with between the victim and the perpetrator. Because these people eventually they come together. Somehow you get the LCs coming in, and then but if the policeman was the one on ground, he understands the moment a crime was reported, there is no withdrawing the crime. But if this person, there is that continued interaction between the two entities, then at the end of the day, that crime will be withdrawn. The other person, because of factors down in the community, will have to withdraw the case, because at the end of the day, he's sure the police are not going to protect him. I remember I had a case where somebody called me and they needed help somewhere in Mitiana. I even don't know the person. And this person, the boy had defiled a girl on the village. Now, the relatives of the girl were threatening the mother of the victim. So I had to call the former DIGP, Major General Sabiti, and I gave him information. He sent a team with 3 trucks to go and visit. Immediately the suspect was arrested and put in. Now just imagine if there was no person, if I didn't know, and if the person, the victim, did not know a person who knew me, that means that case would have died a natural death.
So
now,
has it not died because he was arrested? Because the issue not be arrested.
It hasn't died.
At the management of the case.
You see, the issue at the end of the day, the people should see. Cases collapse. But can people get satisfaction that something was done? And that is where the police get it wrong. They think that prosecuting a case to the end, that improves the image. No. What the perception, it is about what people perceive. If you don't pick this person, then the people will claim the police were bribed. Yet there was no money exchanged. But the problem was nobody took the effort to go and carry out an arrest, and the people saw an action was taken.
Charles, you had a rebuttal to make on that, but isn't it a valid point that
no, it
the
is.
investigation
However, I have issues with that statement because even, for example, without going personal, I've had situations where Tom rings me and say, "Oh man, Twine, we understand this man has been detained for the last 2-3 days. Why can't you give him a bond? Why can't you?" I mean, you know, it becomes a paradox. The issue in police shouldn't be arrest. We are focused towards, most especially on the output. He's talking of the 400 or whatever budget. We have departments in police. And they are not, all those departments are not all about managing crime. No. So the issue of budget, let me tell you, Raymond, police has got the biggest task. I was looking at, for example, the issue of economic crimes. You cannot prove any case of embezzlement, much as you are a police officer and you see there is glaring evidence that there was embezzlement without an audit report. Police does not supervise the Auditor General. Police does not supervise the doctors who do medical examination to these victims. We have situations, we have some districts where a doctor comes once in a week. We have situations where there are no state attorneys. We have some places where there are no magistrates. A case is reported, police does it. By the way, I wasn't comfortable when you said we do desk armchair investigation. That's not true. You go to Rizira, 98% of the prisoners who are in government prisons have passed through police. There is no shortcut to prison. They have passed through police. There are so many people convicted and sentenced. There are some people on remand based on the evidence got on the suspect, got at the scene of crime, got from independent witnesses. So the narrative that we do armchair investigation is wrong.
But the question the question has been about indicating even in the crime report how far, what has been done. If someone has reported and the settlement happened outside of police, can it be reflected that that settlement happened outside of? Is it possible for you to track and use that data?
Raymond, a crime is an offense against the state. There is nothing like settling a case outside court in criminal management. No. And it becomes extremely wrong for a person to settle a matter of defilement because there is a victim. This girl will make 18 years and he will ask you, "Ma'am, you settled this thing without my consent." In any case, she is below the age of consent. What will the mom say? So the issue of the other time I was with you guys, you are the ones who broke the information here. In Burkina Faso, they are investigating a case of murder against Sankara. 30 years down the road, we received a team of police officers from Sweden following up a matter that had been committed 17 years ago. We are managing a crime crime management is science. There is no shortcut. It must be methodical and procedural. If you rush, yet there is what they call the standard of proof, which is beyond reasonable doubt, you make a mistake.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a very short break, but when we get back, we continue this conversation. Thank you so much for staying with the Fourth Estate. We're still discussing the police crime report and how journalists reported on it. Tom, just before we broke off, they were discussing for us how crime and its reportage and its investigation is a science. Are journalists being impatient with the police force on how it's investigating crime? Is it a crisis of the newsrooms also not following through on the crimes that we report about to know what has happened to them in the end?
Raymond, what I can say, it is a question of commitment. The crimes, the officers, unfortunately, who investigated, for example, the murder of Chijana Ngoma, many of them have retired. But do I see the same level of commitment that I saw then? Do you think if the quality of officers we have today in CID headquarters, if they were faced with investigating an issue related with John Katuram, a prime minister of Toro, they would break through?
Yeah.
If today's officer is not committed, he's not up to the task, he's laid back, he's more interested in doing his desk job, 5 to 6. But if they went ahead and did more than what they ought to do, it is always that extra push that gives you the results. Yes, I can tell you, in investigating the crime against Chijana Ngoma, it was an officer who went an extra mile. It was even after working hours, and there were gunshots on Namirembe Road. When this guy followed the case, there he found a person who gave them a link to who had actually pulled the trigger on Chijana Ngoma away in Fort Portal. If this officer had just sat back and said, no, I am not going to do anything, it is a 5 to 6 job, then nothing would have happened. I'm not saying they are not doing. Yes, investigations are a science today, but can we go that extra mile? Because yesterday there were officers who investigated the same of crimes, and they are responsible for people being in Luzira. But today, with all these murders that have taken place, why aren't we seeing the same level of cracking, of coming out with results? Yes, we can blame the report. We can blame the lack of RSAs. But at the end of the day, there is a crime to fight. And the police is supposed to be doing that job. For example, there are things that my brother Twine will not tell you here on camera. I've interacted with some of the cases involving fraud. And officers have investigated and taken the file to the DPP. And if the DPP people want to fail an investigation, they'll come up with 31 or 35 queries. But if they are interested in a case, it will pass as easily. Now, that one is affecting the way the officers are doing their work. But Twitter will not tell you that if there is an interest, for example, if they're recording a statement from a suspect, they even include their number. I know for sure that the people in DPP call up these criminals and negotiate and get the people off. Now, an officer at the end of the day looks at the file with so many queries, and then he's wondering, how am I going to go ahead and investigate all this? What he does, he folds the file and puts it away. As long as many crimes have been shelved like that, once a crime has been reported, there is always that aura of people trying to demand for justice at that particular time. After 2 weeks or 3 weeks, it becomes a case of a CID officer. It is no longer of interest. Nobody is inquiring. The president is no longer inquiring. But at the end of the day, this officer is now, he has now to dig deep into his coffers to fund this investigation. Now you wonder, all this money that we are pushing into the police, what work is it doing? The officer on the ground who is doing the actual investigation is not receiving this money to facilitate him to go out. You get? At the end of the day, what he does, he folds the files and puts it away. This is now why we have so many cases. You have so many backlog. You have so many to clear that you need another project. We have criminals who are continuing. We are just recycling just because somebody did not do their work or somebody is not facilitating the process
of doing their job. Charles, I want to bring you in here, but also I want you to acknowledge the fact that a lot of high-profile crime, which the public has clamored over, hasn't been investigated to its conclusion.
Like what?
Whether we talk about the Kawesi murder suspects, all of them have been let go.
We have the chosen person in court.
They've since been let go because of torture.
No.
Whether we talk about the Muslim clerics, the matter came up again. The investigations were bought from the start. Whether we meant many high-profile crimes always have the public demanding and then police producing suspects, and then the court process saying these suspects have either been tortured.
You're not talking about Kazinda case.
Yes.
It's not high profile?
No. I'm just mentioning to you cases where there would be valid examples. So even with acknowledgement of the fact that the police is doing work, the criminal investigations department is doing work, isn't it a fair criticism that some of the desk officers are not motivated enough to do the extra mile to catch criminals?
Thank you, Raymond. In one of the ways in which we improve performance is getting through such kind of criticisms. But we also need to be fair when we are criticizing. Sometimes when you criticize without evidence, it simply becomes a prejudice. You cannot tell me that we don't have the competencies compared to the past. We have since trained, we have benchmarked, we have been mentored. Our investigators, even the investigators of tomorrow, will be better than the investigators we have today because it's deliberate. We've had cases where we have scratched from zero, including the Godi case. You reach at the scene, there is totally nothing. It takes ingenuity and intuition to initiate. We've done that. That is not the days of Chijanangoma. Including this case, the recent one, about a month ago in Nakuravi. There was virtually nothing. But because of the ingenuity of some investigators, they developed about 3 theories, pursued them. On the 3rd theory, they said, yes, they landed on a man. Investigation is now more easy with science than it was yesterday. We have now phones. Almost all criminals commit crimes, and in one or another, they will use their phones. You cannot tell me that lead can fail a police officer than yesterday. No. We have had cases like the terrorism case of 2010. It was beautifully investigated, courtesy of the ingenuity of a cross-section of investigators. And enhancing training and making investigators proficient is a work in progress. Let me tell you, we've had situations to be in trainings and workshops across the globe. We've been in Seychelles, we've been in Korea, we've been in Cairo, we've been in America. Let me tell you, Ugandan investigators are excellent. When we reach there, we are given groups. We are given a case. A case you study, then you come out with the investigative results. I can tell you, wherever there is a Ugandan, it's an investigator from Uganda that is fronted to discuss. We have got testimonies from most of our colleagues. Uganda is very endowed with best investigators, and it has been deliberate.
Raymond, in 1968, Mohammed Hassan was the director of CID. He was sent by then the Ugandan police, CID, was like the Scotland Yard of Africa. They were sent to Kenya to investigate murders that had taken place in the Rift Valley. They came out with very positive results. If I could ask Bwana Twine, what is the progress on the Entebbe Express murder? What is the progress on the Entebbe murders of women?
Can I answer
Isn't
that?
that incompetence?
No. Let me tell you. First of all,
what they did,
it's fine.
They chanced on the ease.
Did I understand?
You get?
Let's finish the question and then
They chanced on the ease. Many of these cases are basically handed over to them. You get? But you don't see, for example, what we used to you have when there was Wembley, when there was RRIU. Those guys were not even policemen. You get? But once there was a gunshot and somebody was killed, the commander then, Mr. Magara, he's now retired, David Magara, he used to say, I want that gun. And there was nothing done until the gun was recovered. Do you know how much murders can be committed with a single gun?
Are you aware we recovered 60?
I've only seen 2.
No.
Yes. So yes, Charles, but you need to respond to Tom's concern about the speed, the efficiency, the motivation of officers who are carrying out.
Let me tell you, with investigations, you don't rush things. Investigation is targeting results. But I wanted to bring it to his attention, and the attention of viewers, that the murderers of Entebbe were arrested and the place purely pacified.
What was their motivation?
Now that's another discussion altogether. That's another discussion altogether, because your concern was we never did anything. All the murderers of Katavi along the express highway in Nansana were arrested and the place was pacified. Out of that kind of arrest, 3 people were convicted on their own plea of guilt, and other 7 are still undergoing trial. And that is something very, very interesting. But Raymond, I wanted to clarify on the issue of the DPP. First of all, I wanted to remind viewers and my brother here, Tom, that all investigations in Uganda are directed by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. The DPP cannot murder his own child. The DPP office is appraised, and the appraisal is based on the competencies and the output.
Maybe.
So the narrative that somebody directs police on what is not achievable, that's not true. The criminal justice, the criminal justice system is very long. There is an input of a police officer, there is an input of the DPP, there is an input of court. The DPP can never and shall never deliberately suffocate investigation, because evidence is scientific. Each and every case has its own ingredients, which the DPP cannot kill. But what the DPP does for purposes of efficiency and effectiveness, remember, he's the one who has the monopoly of prosecution. And the standard of proof is beyond reasonable doubt. So what the DPP wants to do is to ensure that he establishes a prima facie at the stage of the police, so that by the time he takes the matter to court, really court has nothing. Even all the questions that will be asked by the defense will be irrelevant, and we score as a team. So when the DPP makes further inquiries, however long they are, to us it's not a disappointment. He aims at making the case very beautiful, and he has they have done that, and we appreciate. So Tom, don't view that in bad faith. And tomorrow you may be the one that may need such kind of instruction.
Charles, I want us now to bring the discussion on, because we're about to finish. And institutionally, because the show is really about how the press covers events. And I want to ask you, Charles, because you really interact with the press with the regards of criminal investigations. What do you think needs to change about the nature of coverage of crime that would make the police more efficient at their job?
No, training. First of all, we need to clean our journalism fraternity. We have so many untrained journalists, and we have a lot of trouble with them when we are dealing with them. I'm telling you, somebody insists that he needs the evidence. He needs an exhibit. He even wants to cover the exhibit. And even when he covers, he wants to show it to the public. Remember, for us, we receive it as intelligence. Sometimes even you go to the DPP and say, no, this is not an exhibit. This is not an exhibit. Sometimes then you report you share A, and what is reported is B. It makes our work completely very hard. Then sometimes, people put sentiments. Like we had issues in this politics. you clearly see that this reporting or this analysis is completely partisan. It's completely partisan. But we have professionals like Tom, Bagal. I have colleagues like Raymond. I have always listened and followed you. And I want you to use those virtues and competencies to cascade to your colleagues. But other than that, we cannot really pride in our achievements without you guys. You are our bridge, you are ambassadors. But all we need is that, first of all, we need to engage each other. We do an analysis, and the reporting should be limited to what is news, but not what is evidence. Because for us, we deal with evidence, but we even qualify it to be evidence only when it reaches in court, as advised by the DPP. Other than that, we've had cases. For example, he has quoted some cases which we have lost. I mean, we are not the ones that prosecute. Even the prosecutors are not the ones that judge. We have lost cases painfully. We have even sometimes appealed and even lost because the standard of proof is beyond reasonable doubt. There is a case here which we are following, and I hope we shall get conviction. Some two people went to Marara, picked a driver and murdered him. And the body was buried at the hospital without carrying a postmortem. Now, if we maintain that, you can never succeed with that case. So as I talk now, Flying Squad in conjunction with the Mbarara, they have got an exhumission order. They are going to exhume. You can see that kind of horror that we go through. You're exhuming a body that was buried on 7th. It is now 23rd. 13 days down the road, you are going to exhume. And it takes heart. And you still think that we are desk investigators? No. We need you guys, and we know together with you we can strive, but we need a formal engagement so that as a team we score. Because at the end of it all, crime affects each and every person.
Tom, in conclusion, crime is one of those areas in the newspaper, on TV, that attracts a lot of public attention. People are fascinated by crime. People are fearful of crime. What is it about the criminal reporting element, and what can you say about criticism of crime reporting internally, in-house? How can we get better as journalists at reporting crime?
Okay, a while ago, Trina talked about training. Yes, the training is there, but I know, yes, there is still for more training, but on the other hand, as journalists, you see, when reporting crime, I didn't attend so much training as regards crime reporting, but I made an initiative to better myself as far as crime reporting is concerned. For example, looking at the statistics, other than covering it as today's event, how about looking at cases of interest, things like rape,
yeah, sure,
things like murder, things like motor vehicle thefts. You see, when you are reporting crime, yes, you need to stand in the feet of both the police and the victim. Because today, if I've not been affected by crime, it will affect me tomorrow. Then from that point, I can report in what is most favorable to the police. But when I stand as somebody who is standing with the victims, now I look inside what is happening in the police. And that comes out of your own self-initiative. You don't learn that in school. It is your own self who is going to go out there and say, okay, I think there was a crime that was committed here. I need to find the victim. I need to help do A, B, C, D. And then when you get the crime report at the end of the day, what are you looking at? If you're going to look at, the police are very good at pointing a very rosy picture of what they do. But if you're going to look at the number of cases that have been taken to court, the number of convictions secured in court, that is not, Trina should not tell you that that is not their work. No, it is, the convictions are based on the evidence they provide. I can tell you when the police was still prosecuting those cases that are taken to court, when the present IGP was, one time he was OC prosecution, they had very good convictions.
The population?
The population notwithstanding, because crime has not changed.
Technology and mobility.
Even then, a robbery is a robbery. Somebody robs a car with a pistol. He did it in 78. He still does it in 2020. So that does not need you rocket science to solve that kind of case.
Some robberies
when
are
he
now done on
was,
phone.
they were very good convictions as compared to what we have now. We have so many people who are very good at speaking English in all these offices, very good at writing reports, but ask them for results. But tomorrow they will be saying, okay, I want to be the judge, I want to be this, I want to, but how many convictions have you secured? I can tell you the chairman EC, when he was a principal prosecutor, the evidence is still there. How many convictions that he had in court and today. But all these people who are being named judges, what have they done to build the system? You get, as long as we don't get to that level, then the criminals will continue to hold an upper hand.
Tom, I want you to also speak about the dying art of follow-up in the newsrooms. I know that there are crises and problems with the institutions outside the newsroom, but the newsroom itself is dying. When I look at the newspapers, for example, I read about a crime today, 3 weeks down the road, I can't even trace it in the newspaper. 1 year down the road, when I ask a reporter in the newsroom, you are reporting on this crime, what happened? They don't tell you what happened. Even in cases where the police could have done tremendous work, for example, in the Entebbe murders, we still don't know what happened in between there.
To the contrary, you know the opposite.
Out of the follow-up.
I think what we lack is institutional memory in most of our newsrooms. Most of the senior people are very hard to come by. Most of these media houses cannot pay the senior people. For example, if you are a senior person in a newspaper like the Washington Post, you will find that somebody will only write one article in a month, and you will be paid for the whole month. But this is where we have in Africa, you are senior, but then you are paid per story. And that creates a crisis. Even the people who are managing all the resources in the newsroom, they don't know who is Tom Malaba. What is his claim to fame? You get, they have just seen me in the newsroom when I brought my papers and I wanted to be hired, but they don't know how much that once you have a name, Tom Malaba, on a paper, it is just enough to sell. I've written a crime, I've written a crime column in the paper, I've hosted a radio talk show. All that they don't have. So when they're having, as long as you can speak your very good English, they'll put you up there and they'll give you a task. But when come to go down to investigate or to follow up a case, that is when you find people, somebody just sits back and then makes a call to Mr. Twine. Mr. Twine gives him some details. It doesn't even go down to follow what Mr. Twine has given them to follow. They just produce what has been given to them. We need to go as the newsroom so that we need to go a step further. And then that institutional memory would help us to know, yes, there was a crime that was committed last month, so and so was murdered. How much investigation has been done on that case? 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, until this case is in court, so that you follow it up there. But you have people who are really depending on this very small story to survive. So you can't get such, the follow-ups are not as much coming, and then the institutional memory is lacking in many of the newsrooms. And so that is why you are saying, you are finding that the reportage is still as poor.
Charles, very, very finally, you're a police officer, but you're one of us. You understand the workings of the newsroom.
Yeah, sure.
What would you say we need to improve in the newsrooms so that the reporting on crime gets better, but also helps police fight back?
No, I entirely want to agree with my brother Tom that we need to put a deliberate mechanism of follow-up. Once a case, especially high-profile cases, have been reported, different reporters or different producers or whatever person that is behind the news can always team up with police to ensure that he pushes or he gets reminded or he reminds police that this was a matter of public interest. So to what extent have you gone? And we can do that one routinely, maybe like a monthly basis. So I want to agree with him that there should be a mechanism of follow-up. But also, my brother, we need to, I want to emphasize on training. You know, sometimes when there are no ethics, then there is no morale. You cannot, you actually get excited on whatever comes. And sometimes you forget that you have a task to profile and bring back to memory a matter that was one time of high profile in nature. Now, of course, also most importantly, is that you need to be mindful of bloggers. You know, the public is being woodwinked by what is sometimes online and sometimes which is so glaring and inciting the violence. Yesterday I had a workshop in Makerere and we had a talk about fake news. And I told them fake news can cause a crisis. So management of these many main broadcast companies should be mindful of that, guard against it, remain robust and focused to serving the people. And when you do that, you need to put a stringent guard against people that penetrate your system. As police, first of all, we commit, we pledge our commitment, and it's not a favor. It is provided for under the Constitution. Article 212, particularly paragraph D, obliges us to ensure that we work with the public generally and the civilian authorities. But also in return, citizens have got a responsibility, and it is also provided for under the Constitution. Article 17, duties and responsibilities of citizens. And one of the responsibilities is to work with the police to ensure that we make Uganda a crime-free society. So once you work within the perimeters of the law, then you deliberately put institutional bring-up system. Then people will trust in us, and you will also bring us to order. You know, the difference is that for us, we are overwhelmed by work. We are overwhelmed by work. We are only 43,000. We are policing 42 million Ugandans. Now, if we are to deliver, if you rate, it is now one police officer to 900 Ugandans, including the IGP going in the field to record a statement. So, but once we have a mechanism like the newsroom, routinely visiting us, reminding us of cases that are of high profile, inevitably we shall always give you priority, and together we shall serve the Ugandans.
All right. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you so much, Tom. And thank you so much, our viewers, for tuning in. This has been The Fourth Estate, the show that covers just how the press has covered news angles of the stories that they're covering and making journalism a much better fraternity. Have yourselves a good evening.